Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of All Sports Now. My name is Cory Sparks. I'm your main host, and this is a podcast where we cover a variety of sports with a variety of guest hosts. Quick reminder to follow our socials to get sports and podcast updates on a daily basis. We are at all.sportsnow on Instagram, at allsportsnowpod on Twitter, and all_sports_now on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and leave a kind rating. Otherwise, you can follow us on Spotify or turn on your notifications for whatever platform you listen to us on. Today, we're going to try this again. We had a little slip up in editing. We have our editor, Ryan Patton, and Carthage College basketball's very own Anthony Bernero here to talk about the D3 basketball playing experience, the NBA Rookie of the Year conversation now that Lamellar is hurt, and the NBA trade deadline, and much more right here on All Sports Now.
Going to try to work the ball on the boundary. Tatum steps into it. Pass is caught. Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Vikings win it! And the Cubs have finally won it all! 8-7-10. Let it go! Rebound Bosch. Back out to Allen. His three-pointer. Bang! Tie game with 5 seconds remaining!
Hello and welcome back, everybody. This is episode 18 of the All Sports Now podcast. Before me, Anthony, and Ryan get going, here's a few general sports updates to keep everybody in the loop. In the NFL, the San Francisco 49ers went up and grabbed the number 3 pick in the 2021 NFL draft, and they dealt their number 12 pick to the Dolphins, who ended up trading that pick to the Eagles. Lots of moving going on. Malcolm Butler just signed a 1-year contract with the Arizona Cardinals, and Matt Breida just signed on with the Bills for a year. Andy Dalton also landed in Chicago for a 1-year deal as well. And also with the NFL, just coming this morning of this recording, actually, there is going to be a 17-game regular season. In the MLB, opening day is right around the corner, and the first pitch between the Toronto Blue Jays and the New York Yankees will kick off the season at 1:05 p.m. Eastern Time on April 1st. March Madness is living up to its name as huge upsets like Ohio State falling to 15-seed Oral Roberts, Illinois falling to 8-seed Loyola Chicago in the round of 32, and even Oregon knocking Iowa out in the round of 32 took place in just the first week. No perfect brackets actually made it through the first week, which it's been the first time that's happened in a while, just with all the upsets. Speaking of basketball, though, we have Carthage College basketball freshman forward Anthony Bernero and the show's editor Ryan Patton on to talk all about it today. How's it going, guys?
Doing good, man. How about you?
Pretty good. How's it going, Anthony?
I'm good. How are you?
That's awesome. Pretty good, man. Thank you. I'm glad you're doing well as well. We're going to kind of jump into your experience, Anthony, as a D3 basketball player. Could you kind of describe your freshman year in Carthage College basketball? And I'm sure it was kind of a weird one with COVID and everything, but if you could sum it up for us, that'd be great.
Yeah, it was pretty weird getting thrown into the college scene, going through a whole pandemic and all that, but it worked out. You know, we only got to play 12 games, but it was really nice seeing the guys and like getting to know them and all the freshmen as well. Myself personally, I personally exceeded my expectations. I didn't feel like I had the confidence that I know I can go out there and play, but it was just the fact of getting over that hump of like, yeah, I can compete with these guys out here, even though they may be faster, stronger, more athletic than me. But it was just a learning experience altogether.
That's awesome, man. I was going to say, I was kind of looking at the box score. You got a good 5 or 6 minutes a game, which for a freshman, that's a pretty good exposure. So that's awesome. Something else I was going to ask you is what's one word you would use to describe Carthage College basketball in general, the atmosphere, the locker room, and just playing with the guys?
Yeah, it's just one big family. That's basically what it is. Like, you can go up to any guy in the locker room, talk about anything. If you need anything, help with homework, classes, even just life in general, they'll talk to you, help you through it. You know, that's the whole point of a team. We're just one big family. We're always there for each other. And it showed on the court most of the time, but, you know, that's what happens in sports. It gets competitive, but, you know, it's how it works.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. So we're going to kind of shift gears. Thank you for sharing all that, of course. And we're going to talk about the NBA. Ryan, what's the first topic we got in the NBA here that just kind of recently happened, actually?
So, This just happened recently. A new trade just happened. Aldridge is going to the Nets, and Drummond is going to the Lakers, and that was kind of a blindside for me seeing that in the news. I mean, I'm sure we're gonna discuss it for a little bit, but Cory, I just want to know what your thoughts on that would be.
Yeah, so it's kind of a free agency thing. The NBA runs through a buyout market where pretty much a team and a player can compromise and you can take a pay cut as a player in order to basically cut ties with the team and go somewhere else. Not a whole lot of details on how much of a pay cut Aldridge and Drummond took, but it kind of just looks like an arm race right now. I mean, they're both beefing up their teams. The Lakers got Drummond now, who has been the NBA leader in rebounds for I don't even know how many years. Aldridge has been a pretty good offensive presence, and he's been kind of knocked for his defensive effort, but they're both just trying to get 1 to 12. They're trying to blow out the entire league, and they're trying to meet each other a couple months from now. So, Anthony, what do you think of this kind of powerhouse-oriented league now where two teams are just kind of going at it?
Yeah, it's the way I see it is kind of the same thing as franchise tags in NFL. Nobody really likes it, but if it works out for your team, then it's okay. Yeah, all I've heard is negative thoughts about Aldridge going to the Nets, saying it's overpowered, while Andre Drummond the next day goes to the Lakers. But I mean, that's the rules. You can do whatever you want. The GMs are just trying to get towards a championship.
And I mean, like honestly, I feel like he wouldn't even have that great of a spot on the Nets. I think the Nets are just too stacked at this point, especially when like that with the whole free agency thing just happening. It's like they don't have enough time to play with each other as a team. Like, to build up team chemistry, it takes like at least a few months before they can actually start, learning what works for them and learning the flow of their own game. I feel like that's going to bite them in the butt in the playoffs. Cause I mean, I feel like they're going to make it at this point, but I feel like it's going to bite both teams because they don't really know how to play with each other just yet. I mean, I feel like the Lakers will be better off a little bit, but I think the main problem would be the Nets.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, you bring up a good point with team chemistry. We're going to kind of talk about Victor Oladipo and the mess that is the Houston Rockets later in this podcast. But when you have guys just kind of thrown together, we're a little over halfway through the season. They got to play about 25 or 30 games together, and then it's playoff time. So I guess we'll kind of see how they match up. One thing I was going to ask both of you, actually, is the reason that a lot of this is getting negative comments. What do you think of the whole super team theme, I guess, that's taken over in the last decade, where you're not really working with people who were drafted by your team, but you're kind of constructing a team? You get a big star like LeBron, or you get someone like Kyrie or KD or Harden or whoever people want to believe the best team on that Nets, or the best person on that Nets team is, and then you kind of mold a team around them. What's your take on the super team era that's been going on the last few years?
Yeah, in my opinion, it's starting to look like pickup basketball. I mean, I'm not hating on it, but you always want to play with the best players, and you're not going to miss out. You're not going to miss out an opportunity to play with the best players in the world. Most players only get 6 or 7 years in the league, and the best ones get around 15. But I'm not going to hate on a guy for wanting to win a championship. Like, yeah, what Kevin Durant did going to the Warriors was kind of like an iffy move, going to like the best team in the world at the time. But I mean, you can't hate on a player for trying to win a championship. That's what everybody talks about with LeBron and Michael Jordan, who had the most rings. So how are you going to hate on them for trying to go win a championship?
Yeah, and I think also the idea of a super team, I think it's always been a thing. It's just, it's been more prevalent now. Like, the one super team that we all, or at least the first super team that we all think about in the modern era, was the Golden State Warriors. But the thing about that super team is that it took years and a ton of rebuild seasons, a ton of trade deals to get that team to be the way that it was, a year or two ago. But the idea of super teams have always been a thing. I mean, the Rockets technically were a super team. They just couldn't capitalize on how much star power they had a few years ago. You could even consider last year's Clippers a super team with how Paul George, even though I think he's overrated, but how Paul George and Kawhi Leonard were there, two great defensive players. You would think that they would just power through the West, or at least hold up a decent amount of competition, but they were knocked out like the first or second round last year. But either way, it really depends on how the team capitalizes on what they have. And plus, with how the game has changed throughout the years, instead of building a team on like how each player can play towards like their strengths. Like let's say like a center is great at rebounding, but they can't make a layup for their life. Well, they're still going to be on the starting lineup because they can grab as many boards as they can and then kick it out to their point guard who is a great passer and then kick it out to their small forward who is a slasher. But now it's just if your best player is the center, they just run with that. You see that in Jokic where it's like that man can shoot threes, can slash, can rebound, can do everything, and that's their best player. So they just run with that. You see the same thing with players like LeBron. I mean, granted, like that's one of the best examples, but now with how the game has changed, if your best player is just someone that can only do a certain amount of things, you can just have you just have to run with that now. So unless if you build a team around that player, which makes a super team, like I said, which is that's always been a thing, you're not going to survive in today's league if you don't have a super team.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I feel like it's just a term we've coined. Like, you even look at the Celtics from a decade and a half ago. Ray Allen was not drafted by the Celtics. You know, he started with the Bucks, went around the league. Same with Kevin Garnett. He was on the T-Wolves at first. So I think people have to remember not everything is drafted up for sure. But, I mean, I definitely don't blame Andre Drummond for doing what he did after being on the Pistons for so long and then going over to Cleveland. Like, this just isn't winning basketball. And you have the league's leader in rebounds, like I've said, for the past like 5 or 6 years, just going to garbage franchise after I shouldn't say garbage franchise, but franchises that are just in a continuous rebuild. I don't blame him for wanting to play with LeBron, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That's for sure. So next thing we're going to talk about in the NBA is the Rookie of the Year conversation. A lot of people would agree that LaMelo Ball was the runaway favorite until roughly a week ago now, where he came down, braced himself on a fall, and he has a wrist fracture. He could be out for the remainder of the season. So my question to both of you is, we'll start with Anthony. Is LaMelo Ball still the Rookie of the Year, or do we have to consider other options now that he's missing the rest of the season?
Yeah, I still think he should be the Rookie of the Year. I mean, we're playing a shortened schedule this year, so it's not like it's a whole 82-game schedule that he's missing. But, I mean, he's just a human highlight film. Every time he goes on the court, you're waiting for him to do something spectacular, and that's why they're such a good team this year with Gordon Hayward and Rozier. They're just fun to watch. But the only problem with him being Rookie of the Year is that there's not many other options that you could pick from. Like, yeah, Anthony Edwards is doing good, but he's not Rookie of the Year good. Like, he's shooting good, but it's not efficient. The only other person that I'd pick that I know Cory likes is Tyrese Halliburton on the Kings. But yeah, he's shooting really good, but he's just not up to that like highlight film like ready like as LaMelo is.
Yeah, I honestly agree with that. I mean, I think he's put up enough of a case this year with how many games that he played, and we only got like 25, 30 games to go. I feel like I feel like he's kind of proven himself enough to win the award. And plus, a lot of awards in the league are just popularity contests. And just like Zion Williamson, you know, kind of got that handout last year for the playoffs, it's kind of the same with the Rookie of the Year. It's just, hey, who is the most athletic? Who is the most popular at this point? I mean, yes, you can base it off of skill, but if you base it off of skill, then you're not going to make as much money. So I feel like, but I mean, even with skill, with LaMelo Ball doing this, I think he's proven himself enough to really win the award. And who knows, he might not even be out for that long. He could be able to play in the playoffs, so that'll just even prove it more that he deserves it.
I was going to say, Anthony brought up a really good point the first time we recorded this episode, and I'm not going to let it slide because it was a really good point. The Hornets are like a 4 seed right now. And you had mentioned that without him, I mean, what were they last year? They were on the borderline of pretty much rebuilding. I mean, that's why they got the second overall pick. They were kind of roughly around the Bulls. They were like 10, 11 seed, kind of flirting with the bottom. Didn't really know what they wanted to do. Got LaMelo, and all of a sudden this team is playing winning basketball. And like you said as well, they got Gordon Hayward, who's a really efficient shooter. They got Graham as well, Rozier. It's a stacked team. Like they're Malik Monk. They're extremely deep. But I'm going to agree with you in that I don't see anyone else, although I love Tyrese Halliburton, taking this award because the Kings are still not good. They're still fighting for a fringe playoff spot. And then they get blown out by the 1 or 2 seed. while LaMelo Ball is possibly leading this team, although there are helpers with Gordon Hayward and such, leading this team to play some home basketball in the playoffs, which no one could have imagined without him, honestly. So I think it is Rookie of the Year, but I'm kind of going to play the most valuable player card here, in that he is the most valuable of any of the rookie candidates. Without him, this team is not hot garbage, but it's a bunch of decent players, probably led by Gordon Hayward, that might just squeak in, because Gordon Hayward is an improvement. But they're not a 4 seed. They're not a 5 seed. They're barely getting it in the East.
Yeah, and I mean, and with the rest of the rookies this year, I feel like it's kind of like an Andrew Wiggins situation where everyone thought that he was going to be the next big thing when he came into the league. And he's like year 7, year 8, and he's still not that efficient. Like, bro, you've been in the league for a while now. You should be able to score at least 25 points a game. I mean, granted, he's been doing that this year, especially since he's been forced to. He's playing with Stephen Curry. Like, he's got to like help him out a little more than that. But when he was on the T-Wolves for so long, it's just he didn't do anything. Like, yeah, he can shoot, but not efficiently. And I feel like that's kind of how the other rookies are doing it. They're great players. I mean, they're in the NBA for a reason, but it's just they're not LaMelo Ball level at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Anthony Edwards looks great, but even on paper, I think he's still not shooting 40% from the field. And you can't give it to someone, because at that point they're just taking shots and seeing what falls. And in Minnesota, they're not winning a whole lot of games, so he's not really hurting the cause, but he's not really propelling the team forward like LaMelo is. So last thing we're going to talk about in the NBA is our trade deadline winners and losers. We'll start with Anthony, go to Ryan, and then I'll finish off. Anthony, what's a trade deadline winner, or a team that you would classify as a winner for the trade deadline this year?
Yeah, when we previously recorded this, I said the Bulls, and I still stick by that, even though they've lost the only 2 games they've played with their new players. But I still think it's a step in the right direction for an organization that's been waiting for success, especially under new management. Vucevic looked good. Tyson, his first game last night, looked really good. Troy Brown brings something to the team that you could say Denzel Valentine brought, but he's just a little younger, a little more athletic. But yeah, I like how they're shaping this roster together, and especially with the free agency coming next year.
For sure. And then Ryan, who's your winner? I know it's not the Bulls. I'm going to piggyback on Anthony's claim here, but who do you have as the winner this year?
So for me, I'm not denying that the Bulls kind of had a really great trade this year. I also kind of want to mention the Heat, about how they kind of just got an addition to their team. When they got Victor Oladipo, I think that he's a versatile point guard. I've been watching him throughout the last few years, and I think he's a great point guard to start with. And plus, with the lineup that the Heat has right now, they don't really have anyone except Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler needs a lot more help. I feel like if he wasn't playing by himself, basically, in the finals last year, I feel like he would have at least took the Lakers to a Game 7, or at least a Game 6, something like that. I feel like he wouldn't have lost as bad if he had more help. And I feel like with Victor Oladipo, I feel like he's going to get that help, especially since their starting point guard right now is Kendrick Nunn. And he's average at best. He doesn't put up the greatest numbers. They definitely rely on Jimmy Butler for that. So I think he's going to get more help. And I think that's a great trade. But I'm definitely not knocking the Bulls on that one. I definitely just want to highlight the Heat for that one too.
No, for sure. And I feel like, especially with what you're talking about with the Heat in the finals last year, if they weren't so hurt, Jimmy would have had the help. Like, Bam was in and out of games. Tyler Hero, I mean, the rest of them were 20-year-olds who were just getting their exposure to the playoffs for the first time. And here's Jimmy putting them on their back and taking them to the finals against LeBron. So, I mean, I know people joke about it and call it the Mickey Mouse chip or whatever, but he still did have to fight the Heat. But I will definitely acknowledge the argument that it was pretty much just Jimmy Butler among people who are hurt. So I think Oladipo adds some depth, but I'm going to agree with Anthony here. Vucevic is a really good stretch 5. He can light it up from behind the arc, as we've seen so far. He hasn't shot from 3 too much, but I think he's gotten 21 in his first 2 games. It's good to see Zach get some help. I really thought we were going to sell Lauri Markkanen for someone, and we didn't. So that makes me happy to see 2 people down low, possibly a 4 and a 5 in the starting lineup, who can shoot from behind the arc. Laurie doesn't have the best defense inside. Vucevic is decent, but honestly, this league is mostly scoring anyway, and that's what we got these Earth Ice for anyway. So I'm cool with that. Gave up Wendell Carter Jr. and Otto Porter Jr. No offense to them. They were cool and all, but holy injury prone. I used to have the numbers up here. I think Wendell Carter Jr. is playing about 45 to 50 games a season, and before the 2 abbreviated seasons, that's pretty bad. That's about half. Otto Porter, I saw him on the bench more than I saw him on the floor, so cool. I hope everyone enjoys what they got, but I am completely okay with giving away some injury-prone players, a couple of first-rounders for winning now. I mean, I said this before. We're watching a franchise that's been rebuilding since Jimmy Butler left for the Timberwolves 5 or 6 years ago, and we are yet to get over like 32, 33 wins in a season. So even if we barely get to that this year, it's good to see the organization and the new front office, honestly, making urgent moves, not laying back and going, we'll see how these young guys pan out next year, and then we'll match them up with more young guys, and then we'll get like you don't want the scenario like the Thunder right now, where the current, I think it's it's Oklahoma. Their starting 5 in college is older than the Thunder's. That's cool and all. That's a really cool stat, but I would much rather like win after watching a bunch of young guys kind of figure it out while Zach just scores 30 a game. So it's good to see him get some help for sure.
Yeah, and also Anthony, what you said earlier is like, even though that they lost a couple of games, it's still a good trade. I just think that they just need like at least like 5 more games together to like kind of get back into the swing of things. Like I'm not saying that like they'll make like a deep playoff run. I don't really think that they will, even if it is the East, because like I said, it's all about play time with each other. Like they need to build up that chemistry. So I feel like they'll start winning more games as soon as they kind of figure out how each person on the starting lineup and on the bench tick, get a lot more experience in there and stuff like that. So yeah, I think they'll start winning a lot more games soon.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I think Vucevic just had, to this day, 3 practices with the team, something like that, because he traveled up and then started practicing. So, I mean, that's barely anything. He's got to learn the offense. He's a facilitator as a 5. I mean, he can take it up on the court if he needs to. Not that he would need to with Kobe White and Zach coming up out of the backcourt, but if he needs to, he could. He's not really going to embrace that role until he learns the offense and how we rotate, though. So it should be an interesting fit. Completely biased opinion here, though. I hope they're ready for the playoffs. I hope they can actually make a push and go in, especially with the new playoff format where I guess anyone from the 7 seed to this 10 seed could or could not make it. There's a mini 4-game. That's another episode because they're really changing everything again. I don't know if it's for Zion this time. I think it's just for TV views. But last thing we're going to do before we wrap up this episode is talk about an NBA trade deadline loser. Anthony, we'll start with you, go to Ryan, and then to me. What team just swung and missed this year?
My opinion, I believe the 76ers had an opportunity to really push themselves over the hump and try and actually compete with the other teams in the East. They'd get to the second round and then teams would start to figure out, okay, it's really just Ben Simmons, can't shoot, just running around. And Embiid will get his, but it's the players around him that are struggling. You have the opportunity to go out there and get Kyle Lowry. It's probably for sure top 10 in the league, point guard wise. That could really shore up your chances of making it a little farther in the playoffs, especially with Embiid being hurt now. Also, I like Seth Curry, how he's playing for them. So that also would have been good with him and Lowry in the backcourt. But yeah, I feel like they missed out an opportunity to improve.
Yeah, for sure. And something I'll always knock that 76ers team is, although they did trust the process and they've been in the playoffs the last 4 or 5 years, they're not doing anything once the playoffs start. I mean, last year, I know the bubble situation was really weird, but that was abysmal. Like the Celtics absolutely handed it to them, and they were never in the series from the start. So to get a veteran player who just won a chip 2 years ago, obviously had the help of Kawhi, I think that would have helped the backcourt a ton, especially with Seth, who's kind of in uncharted territory, getting the minutes that he's getting. He got some minutes on the Mavs before, but other than that, and a little bit on the Blazers, but he's really taken on a role of his own. So to have a vet beside him to kind of show him the ropes and guide him through what better be a good playoff run for a team that's a 1 seed right now would have really helped them out. But Ryan, who do you have as a loser this year?
Someone that definitely swung, missed more than they should have is definitely the Rockets. And it's disappointing because just like I said about like 15 minutes ago in this episode, they kind of had it going for them. They kind of had a super team. They had Chris Paul as a point guard, James Harden, as much as I don't really like him, he's a beast on offense. They had Clint Capella on the boards and, really being a bully down there. They completely dropped the ball in the last couple of years and didn't really get anything in this trade deadline. If anything, I think they just need new management because they were not
really smart with how they traded their players off this year. And I think I said this when we previously recorded this when my mic was off. But if they would have kept at least Russell Westbrook for another year and then trade him off to get some draft picks or a better player, then I feel like they would have been better off this year. But now they literally have nobody on their team that can really efficiently score. No offense to anyone on that team. You're in the NBA for a reason. But at this point, at this late in the season, they basically shot themselves in the foot. So if they would have like at least, or even keep James Harden for another year, I know that he was begging to leave, but he is still under contract. He's still technically an employee. So you could have kept him for at least another season and then traded him off for something better, for some draft picks to rebuild. So I feel like it just wasn't a smart move on their part doing it. So like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like just doing it too soon. You know what I mean? Where it's just like they could have just waited it out and seen and saw what they could have gotten in the offseason.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I kind of did a little more diving in just to try and understand why the Rockets did what they did. I still think it's stupid, by the way. But Victor Oladipo basically was on a one-year deal with them after everything went through with the trade where they got everything in somebody's house for James Harden. And it looked really good for them, right? They're supposed to get Victor Oladipo through the year. Oladipo very clearly didn't want to play for a team that wasn't meshing very well. Yeah, whatever. Okay. But all they got for him was Kelly Olynyk, Avery Bradley, and first-round draft pick swaps with the Heat. I don't think it takes a genius to understand that unless there's some crazy trades in the NBA this year, which I'm not going to put that out, even though the deadline's over, unless there's some weird transaction that goes on, the Heat are not going to have, or the lottery goes crazy, the Heat are not going to have a better pick than the Rockets. Okay, the Heat just got Oladipo. The Heat are trying to win. The Heat went to the finals in a very weird, odd year last year. They're trying to go to the playoffs and they're trying to win. The Rockets, I don't know what they're doing now. I thought the Harden deal was great and that they got so much and they got rid of what we called a parasite in Harden. But honestly, if this was your decision, I'll take the parasite again because this is not winning basketball. Like you said, and like we had mentioned before in the first recording of this, you can't just keep circulating point guards. Okay, you can't take Russ, kick him out. You can't have Chris Paul and kick him out, and then you bring in John Wall and everything looks all peachy. Turns out John Wall is really efficient from the field, and sure, he has a 360 layup here and there, but at the end of the day, if you're not going to get him any help and you're going to trade away James Harden, I don't know what you're doing. I guess it's rebuild time. I'm not sure. I know Anthony kind of you had a take on this before too. What do you think of them running through point guards pretty much every year?
Yeah, that really comes from the organization and kind of like the communication they have with their best player. Clearly, Harden clearly saw it wasn't working with Chris Paul, so he wanted Westbrook. Then after a year or so, he's like, all right, Westbrook's not working out. Maybe let's try John Wall. And then basically about the time John Wall got there, he's like, all right, I want to leave now. So there's clearly a lack of communication between Harden and the management and what they wanted. And they couldn't really find a compromise. And that's why they never really got that close to – the closest they got was against the Warriors. But then Game 7 happened. They don't hit a three for 20 through 25 attempts. And that, you can't really blame them. That's how the ball rolls sometimes, but they haven't really come close after that.
Yeah, it's like they wanted to be the Warriors so bad, and they could have been, but again, it's like in the last 4 minutes of the game, it's like James Harden starts trying to flop and get fouls instead of just shooting a good shot. Chris Paul is getting frustrated with the rest of the team, and it's just the team never worked at this point. Looking back, it never worked. They had the star power to help them out, and they had the star power to compete. They just couldn't capitalize on it for whatever reason.
Yeah, and the Rockets were up 3-2 in that series. I don't think it was ever 3-1. They were up in that series, and honestly, I remember seeing that series score and going, oh my goodness, this is the end of the dynasty. Looks like James Harden's the move, and now we're going to have a bunch of Rocket bandwagon jerseys around society in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And it didn't happen because, like Anthony said, that's kind of just how the ball rolls. But yeah, I would agree that's their peak. I mean, I would like to compare James Harden, since I was roasting him before, I should probably stay consistent with it, with the spoiled little kid who tells his parents, this is what I want, this is what I want, this is what I want. And they do it right away with the snap of a finger. They acted too quickly. No chemistry was ever established. I'd say Chris Paul was with them the longest, and that just didn't work out in the end once they saw their full potential. And then they circulate through Russ in a very short period of time. And those two were yelling at each other every single game. And then, like you said, once John Wall shows up, Harden's halfway out the door because he realized, you know what, there is no answer here. So I'm not going to say it was the management's decision or the management's fault the entire time, but I can kind of, now that I'm seeing what they do with all these picks, people, and opportunities, I can kind of understand his frustration in that they are given a lot and they've done nothing with it. They've pretty much just thrown up the white flag and said, you know what, we'll try again in a couple of years. Let's go for picks because it does not look pretty in Houston right now.
Yeah, and I mean, and like back to what you said with like how like with how Harden and Westbrook played together, they're both toxic players. They both want to be the main scorer. They both want to be the main facilitator. But the problem with first with Westbrook, the problem with him is that he thinks that he's like all that, and he's really not. I mean, yeah, he's athletic and he's a great player, but at the same time, this man thinks that he can chuck up a three every play, and maybe, just maybe, one of them is going to go in. Like, that's how he plays, and then wonders why everyone hates playing with him. It's kind of the same with James Harden. He can make those shots, but he can't do it during crunch time. And then when he can't do it during crunch time, he start blaming other team members. And then when he starts blaming other team members, or you know what I'm saying? It's just like he just keeps blaming other people instead of himself, and it just didn't end well. So
I think that's all we have. Thank you, Anthony, and thank you for Ryan for coming on and spending your time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
No problem, man. You're welcome on anytime. You as well, Ryan. You're kind of stuck with me. But we will be shouting out Anthony and Ryan on the Instagram. We'll be promoting this episode before, during, and after its release. Make sure you check everything out on the Instagram and all of our other podcast episodes as well if you have not already. And that is all we have for you right here on All Sports Now.
So I think it's time we say goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye. What's the point of all of this?